as we gathered around the campfire in Tarangire National Park in Africa, our safari guide, Goodluck William, told us about his people. The Maasai are a nomadic pastoralist tribe native to Tanzania and Kenya. They have a beautiful, vibrant culture of fierce warriors and brave mothers. But their coming-of-age ceremony is not quite a bar mitzvah or a quinceañera. It involves unmedicated, unsterilized, and untreated male circumcision and female genital mutilation. I'm Emily Font. I'm a cultural intelligence and inclusion ambassador here at North Broward Prep and a future psychology major. And I'm curious to explore the line between cultural intelligence and acceptance and human rights advocacy. Whose place is it to speak to such sensitive issues, such as the rite of passage of the Maasai? And how can we learn to reframe these stark cultural differences as opportunities for connection instead of as barriers? These are just two of many questions that crossed my mind on my 8-day social impact excursion to Tanzania as part of a collaboration with UNICEF and Nord Anglia, North Broward Prep's parent company. On these 8 transformative days, we learned about the UN's Convention on the Rights of the Child and their Sustainable Development Goals. We learned that although some human rights may seem obvious, like child right number 27, food, clothing, and a safe home, others may not be as obvious, like number 8, the right to a government-recognized identity. These are the types of topics that we talked about in our time there. And each night, we had a group reflection on how these different rights related to the hands-on service and the cultural activities that we engaged in throughout the day. Now, each day was extremely memorable, as was every interaction. But one stood out more than the others. My conversations with Goodluck William, our safari guide, elicited the most questions and curiosity. And so, at the risk of North Broward students cringing a little bit considering our recent change in policy, I have to note that a key factor in this experience was my lack of a phone. Now, I only had my phone for 1 hour a day. So, as an AP Art student, the solution to my boredom was obvious: to draw. And draw I did. On the 3-hour ride to the park, I decided to use my observational drawing skills and create a sketch of Goodluck William, gifting it to him after I was done. Now, this small act was only intended to pass time and maybe get a smile out of him. But without even realizing it, I created a safe space for later dialogue. Remember that. That night is when we learned about the shocking traditions of the Maasai. Goodluck William also told us that although FGM was outlawed in Tanzania to perform on minors in 1998, it still occurs at an unfortunate rate. Now, my first reaction to this was disgust, shock, and deep discomfort. And I want to ask you, what are your first thoughts when you hear this? Because if you're anything like me, you're thinking, this has to change. But it was actually at this moment that I realized I have to take a step back. Because although I strongly stand against FGM, and although anger in this context is healthy and normal, anger left unchecked can be destructive and lead to impulsive, uninformed action. Now, this is the key problem. good-intentioned zeal often skips over cultural nuance. I felt very weary as I thought about all of this, of letting my dysregulated emotions get ahead of me, leading me to create a superiority or a savior complex. Because at the end of the day, who was I, some teenage American girl living a prep school life, to fly 20 hours across the world, only to come back with the conclusion that I needed to uproot some ancient cultural tradition without any real knowledge of the nuance that this community faces. And the truth is that it's easy to get angered when we hear about human rights issues. It's easy to immediately think, we need to change this. Why isn't anybody doing anything? But the truth is, the worst thing we can do in this moment is let all this anger get ahead of us and take out our big fat thumbs and go to Instagram or X and air out all of our outrage. Because at the end of the day, we risk alienating the exact people who we could collaborate with to create lasting change. Now, these are the things that I thought about. These questions ran through my mind in their infancy as I observed the most beautiful Tanzanian sunrise. And as I took in the view, I started to come up with some just simple questions that I could ask to give myself more context to this culture, this place that felt so foreign to me. But I have to tell you guys a secret. I know I seem really brave up here with my polished appearance and my polished words, but growing up, I was always a really shy kid. I always had trouble looking people in the eye, and I overthought every interaction with every stranger. So the thought of asking these personal questions to Good Luck William about his cultural context and his community, they were a bit nerve-wracking. But do you remember that drawing? That drawing helped me to establish a human connection with him. And so when the chaperones and teachers started talking to him about all that we learned and all the questions that they had about this new place, that drawing, that connection I established, gave me the courage to step into the conversation and ask him a few questions of my own. I started simple. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges of the Maasai? And he responded, in effect, that gender inequality plagues his community, that girls and women are often mistreated and underrepresented, underappreciated, and that girls don't often get the same opportunities for education that boys do, that this is an ongoing fight. This led me to my next simple question. What age is typical for marriage? And he responded, 16. 16 is the age when in the Maasai culture, boys become warriors, girls become brides. And I later learned that this is typically the age that FGM is performed. He went on to explain that although most Maasai continue to live traditional lives in mud huts, living pastorally off the land, and even having polygamous marriages with up to 10 wives, many, like him, have chosen to live, in his words, a more modern life and move to the city. Like him, to work in conservation and tourism, and like him, to have one wife and 2 beautiful children. It's then that he pulled out his phone and he showed us images of his adorable baby boys, a newborn and a 2-year-old. And he got that glint in his eye that was unmistakable. In that moment, as he explained the joy that his children brought him, every cultural divide shattered, and he was just any dad from anywhere in the world who cares about and wants to provide for his babies. But this heartwarming moment didn't answer all the questions I had. I wanted to learn more about what he thought about the traditions of the Maasai. But I knew that in this moment, it was human connection that was the priority. So when I got home, I decided, getting back to my phone, to self-educate even more. I researched more about the Maasai and their communal way of living. I learned about FGM survivor stories and their through line of courage, of vulnerability, as well as some disheartening statistics. According to the UN, 10% of girls in Tanzania still undergo this, despite it being illegal. Some regions, the stat is as high as 32%. 230 million girls and women have undergone this worldwide. But this 1 to 2 million, this is what really shocked me. That 1 to 2 million represents the girls and women who left their home countries, but continued and brought this cultural tradition with them to countries like France, like the UK, and like right here in the United States. This happens. Now, I get it. This is very overwhelming. But today, on February 7th, by complete coincidence, one day after the International Day of Zero Tolerance of FGM, I'm actually not here to just be an anti-FGM advocate, although that is what I firmly stand for. I'm also not here to tell you to just accept any and every cultural tradition without taking into account the international standards of human rights. And I am definitely not here to tell you that we should just come in and crush change in any type of culture without first seeking to understand the nuances. I get it. This may all seem very big and far away and unrelatable, but this is bigger than just the Maasai or FGM. This is about any cultural difference that we encounter. And although here, it may not be as extreme as an American girl grappling with the implications of an ancient African tradition, differences and divides still exist in this country. Divides like religious culture and beliefs. Divides like different ethnic cultures. Divides like different cultural groups all along the political spectrum. And even cultural phenomena across geographical lines. Now, these sociocultural groups and identities inform the way that we think about highly divisive issues. Issues so divisive that people on both sides believe that the other side is committing a human rights violation. Issues like whether to vax or not to vax. Issues like the legal status of abortion. Let's take a deep breath. I'm not here to tell you how to think on any of these issues. I get it. They're touchy. And I can practically smell your discomfort because I feel uncomfortable too talking about them. But we have to face the truth that there's so much more where these came from. And they're not going anywhere, especially if outrage is our only response. So, what's the alternative? I want to propose emotionally safe dialogue with people who we disagree with and are different than as the solution. Dialogue isn't about debating somebody until we win. It's not even about discussing until we come to a perfect solution or until both of us agree. The only goal of dialogue is getting to better understand the person across from you. Dialogue allows us to get a glimpse into the why behind these cultural traditions as well as the what, the history, and the context surrounding them. And more than anything, dialogue can teach us how to value and uplift the voices of those most impacted by these issues that we care so much about. And so, when we're faced with a cultural difference or a disagreement, we have three options. We can judge and reject out of anger. We can blindly accept and ignore to avoid discomfort. Or we can lean in with curiosity. We can ask, listen, and learn. And so, I have a challenge for you. The next time that you face a cultural difference, something that clashes with what you believe is right, I want you to pause. Before you act, before you judge, before you speak, I want you to ask yourself, am I missing something? Is there a nuance or context that I haven't looked for yet? Am I acting out of compassion, conviction, and understanding? And the biggest question of all, am I building a bridge or burning one down? I want to ask you to dream big by envisioning a world where cultural intelligence and human rights advocacy can coexist, where stark cultural differences are not barriers, but opportunities for global collaboration. Thank you.